Shalom, fellow cinephiles, and welcome to Game Developers Essentials Lessons Book. Today on GDELB, we're going to be looking back on the decade of 2010 and discovering just which of the myriad entries into media were ultimately the greatest. I don't want to make this video, and that's because we as a consumer dyad never stop consuming content. We only pause. There is no end. There's rarely a beginning. The middle dominates. Audience membership is merely a temporary state. You are sitting there watching an episode of your friendly, calm podcast, and suddenly you're a massive. You didn't ask for it. We didn't choose it. And yet, there she is. And now, during riots spreading across the Isle of Man, we have waitresses literally being chased down alleyways by man babies with cutlery. You just can't. It can't be done. You can't. Is this true? Today we're going to disseminate and discover whether this holds any weight. So, let's begin with the first category. A movie, or as it's colloquially named, a coiled visual reel, is access to the window of life. And to understand Endgame's narrative, we can look at Dexter's laboratory, bagels, shipping manifestos, standards versus elements, and how video games may have caused this whole mess. So, the first up is Dexter. Ironic. The actual lab itself is symbolic of Dexter's internalized desperation for dominance. He cannot exude in an outward world because of his physical stature. Banner felt very much the same way about Hulk. Banner was often stepped upon in life, and once he found Hulk, he was able to exude that confined element of himself. But once he discovered that people wanted Hulk instead of Banner, he combined them.
Quill was a person.
This occurs much in the same way that Dexter combined himself with his lab. Secondly, bagels are extremely circular. They have a hole in the middle, and a lot of the times we're trying to run away from our problems and our issues. Fate brings us right back around to where we began. What we learn is that we need to take the dive, to jump into the center, to plug that bagel with our body and our spirit. That makes good rat. Upon consuming the bagel is nothing. This reminds me of Karl Marx. The bagel is representative of consuming American culture, and the MCU is essentially the bagel of the cinematic world. We love to consume bagels because we can't get enough, like Marvel films. Thirdly is the shipping manifesto. When it comes to shipping, you don't always get what you want. Sometimes something's smuggled in there, and in Endgame there were deeper themes smuggled in amongst the shallow themes. Let's talk about post-colonialism. Thanos coming to our planet, hoping to take resources from the host-like colonists and provide them to the unfortunate. It all fits. There are even deeper themes in Endgame. Hulk's dab was a thorough critique of modern American culture, but we don't have the time to discuss it right now. Subscribe to my Patreon. Joker hates black women because they won't laugh at his jokes. Despite the ire this film has drawn, I would like to say that I bought my ticket when going to see it. I am virtuous. Which brings us to trilogies. We all love them. But when The Dark Knight released, social exclusion was at its highest, and it was on Todd Phillips to prove that the killer clown was anything but an engineered hate mob tyrant sadist. Conversely, The Dark Knight is actually about Harvey Dent and Batman. The Joker was filler. This is made obvious by the Joker pursuing Batman until the end, where he admits he is bored.
And it was so boring.
I've had a change of heart.
Vanilla WoW is awesome. Only a few trillion were disappointed, and that brings me to today's sponsor. Shade, Legends of Lado, a brand new strategy game from Studios. This is my favourite part. And the best part? It's free. But is Joker free? If we as our own selves are to take the text as literal, Todd is teaching us that medication should not be taken, because taking 7 medications at the same time would kill a person. Ironic. Metatextual. The truly excellent Decayed production design betrays the shallowness of its inception. It has nothing to say, and yet it will not shut up. This is a clickbait film. It is an anime music video. Enjoying it is tantamount to dude broery. Yes, it's shit, but it's still cinematic shit. Director Todd Phillips was praised for making a realistic retrograde movie, and even said he wanted to make a real movie disguised as a comic book movie, in the same way that lava is disguising itself as liquid heat. But any real person inspired to real violence by this real loser is themselves a real loser, who can't tell that the movie itself doesn't know what the hell Arthur Flick is, other than, of course, the supreme confidence this movie has that this poor, white, male victim has something important to say about modern times. And by the way, we literally see the real movie Modern Times in one scene. That's just how on the red-nosed this movie is. There are several artificial barriers of blockage throughout the city, and at the end of the rainbow, I think we can all agree that The Dark Knight has more plot holes than any film you can name. Money does not burn that fast. But the only time we really notice plot holes is when a story is poorly paced. I'm not being presumptive or judgmental here, I'm still just right.
Is this guy supposed to be Alfred?
So if it's not Joker or Endgame, then I'm looking to strike rich. What about Spider-Man? Well, if you wish to criticize characters like Luke Skywalker, you have to become one first. Luke isn't cool. He has a half mullet and he looks like a lesbian. I would venture to say he is merely best friend hot. And yet, he is infinitely better looking than Ching Chong Wing Tong over here, the absolute worst character in Star Wars. He created an intergalactic phone out of a pager. Impressive, but lackluster. And many complain that his skill with a weapon was unwarranted.
How you doing, you old pirate? So good to see you!
But he trained with a staff for many years, which is essentially a sword-like weapon, as is a blaster. This reminds me of a quote from Chief Astronomical Psychiatrist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Bilberian Bongo Dumble. When it comes to Spider-Man, the decision from JJ to refuse the Porgs and Ewoks, instead using persons of colouring to replace them, was spineless in all but name. Because yes, you can survive for a couple of minutes in space. I googled it. It actually does a lot of good shit, which isn't a bad thing. Not everything is going to be white and green in space. It's not easily, and fuck me, I didn't cry when I was 15, neither should Spider-Man. I didn't want to have to make this video, but it's better than John Wick. Ironic. Like the people who died eating Tide Pods. Look, you never had Star Wars, you never will, because you don't get it. And if you learn to like what you're being offered, you will be a better person. And that is devastatingly important. Like, sure, she may have defeated Kylo, but he's kind of a wiener. And it's not really relevant when you're expected to remember multiple faces, several names, and the last 10 minutes of the movie are just climax. Actual, meaningful character interactions cannot be changed when the character has been established for 50 or more years. Any less than that is fine. I think that media analyses can nourish the soul, and that's why objective analysis is wrong. Aunt May isn't supposed to be hot. That is the nuanced perspective, though I guess it's a pretty nice breath of fresh air. Which means it's not Endgame, it's not Joker, it's not Spider-Man, and it's not Star Wars. There is no film of the decade. First of all, for games, we have the hotness factor, and Kratos' wife was sexy as fuck. But I do want to refocus. VR goggles. Ultimately, they are designed for the athletic, the non-legless, non-armless, and the non-thinless. It's cyclical silliness. If you can't see, then how can you play ableist video games? It's time to call a spade a spade. They are privilege goggles. And whether you use them to play Doom, it is supposed to be a fun game, not a yellow pole simulator. Anthem is entrancing to some extent, but it was supposed to provide me an orgasmic euphoria. It didn't. The game was a big pile of poo-poo smeared over man-sized soldiers. Resident Evil 2 Remake was released and it really made you feel like Batman. The gadgets, the vehicles, the traumatic childhood events, it's all there. Though, just because it's an inferior sequel doesn't mean we should brush it aside as an inferior sequel. It was a monster they could kill and I thought it was pretty cool. So then we enter the selection of low-quality games that lacked quality control, and if we want this industry to grow to a better place, then we need more games like DMC5, a throwback action game from another generation. I can't believe 8 children out there pay 1.2 billion. What could they learn from that? They could learn a lot from this high-level review. I guess I'll stay on course. What about open-world games, where player choice is huge? There is chaotic fighting, tense waiting. It's people. It's the panicked frenzy of people that rubs off on other people. It makes them believe a video game crash is coming when it's not. And then they believe it though, and it does become a reality. This is how a crash happens. Listening is an acquired skill. It takes practice over time. I guess Doom wins this category. This will probably be the biggest category. In order to explore the conunun mimimititi as to why Game of Thrones couldn't possibly end in a satisfying way, we need to go back to Mario. But first, what if Game of Thrones was never meant to be good? Why are we talking about Game of Thrones when the 2020 election is coming out? House Lannister was led by Tywin Lannister, homosexual. And despite the show's message, a lifetime of whoring, drinking, and quipping doesn't actually make you as smart as you think you do. This was covered in recent videos dissecting the Red Car law. The gay has historically been ineffective in places of power. They come in all varieties of forms. Technically speaking, they look amazing. I don't want this to turn into a Dr. Phil, but I get that many as though feel the scene with the High Septum was great, and the Dragonfire was well rendered, but there wasn't enough conversations in dark rooms. Seasons come and go, but some are better than others. Ironic. This reminds me of 19th century German philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. I think that when we really talk about fan stuff like lore, plot, and characters, we need to realise that one book of fictional space facts is no different than another book of fictional space facts. That's how things can still be good while wreaking absolute havoc. Take this boss fight in Dr. Deegan's Vindicative Book of Destiny. It seems to be kind of run in the mill, but when you want to talk about emotive, he risks his life for a chick. If he falls, he's fucking dead. Why was there a conflict? Was there some taxes? they never tell us. Someone from ancient Greece would be utterly disappointed with Dragon Ball Z, so really I think you should ignore that vocal port of the fandom and work on wrapping up the story to continue from there. I guess that means Infinite Crisis on Several Earths is the best book, even though 7 out of every 4 people are terrible at fractions. These days, I can only talk about Star Wars with women. Most men hate Star Wars because they haven't seen it, and in the last year, I have discovered when pissing off white supremacists, you get this.
I don't have your stone, and fuck you anyway.
It all fits. The world of Game of Thrones was ultimately better off with Daenerys than without, and you can see this playing out in real life. We don't root for Hitler because he was shitty all the time. Gandhi. This brings me to political theory, or rather, a place of demonic hell. If you are a person of colour or a female in a piece of art, you should not be a hallucination. That's racist. And furthermore, making the villainous characters an Asian instead of an white is disgusting, and refusal to share information with your subordinates is classic feminist propaganda. When Twump tweets about this or any memes in general, I basically have no choice but to block him. He's quap. And this is indicative of the male problem. All men are evil. Some of them are great. It's a complete jibincidence. Sometimes they just don't women. But when men complain about the Mary Sue, they 100% of the time always look dumb twice. First, you hate women. Second, you don't understand how to follow story narrative flow that you can't see yourself in, making you dumb, ugly, and you abuse women online. Which brings me to my next point. You should always steal property from people. If you want it, it's the smarter move. Nobody owns property. Property is theft, and theft is violence. And violence is the only natural response to flirting. I was once told to smile, among other harassments, but it was the relevant intent to commit touching that was the issue. Look, the wheels of a working economy, they need to keep turning. Because if we believe the market is going to head in X direction, then it's going to head in that direction. I guess it's not okay if you have a vagina, but hopefully that explains why men have a problem with this scene. Many of them have been mansplaining both legally and morally, both incorrectably. If you think about it, in summarization, Vision having his stone removed is like having his penis removed. Not the complete same, but ultimate degeneracy nonetheless, in the same vein as requesting a smile is sexual harassisms. As for the SJW elements of social political Republican justice warrior traditions, this movie, there are giant midgets, trans robots, and a suspicious amount of women, as if we needed any other reason to dislike it. But there are genuine reasons. Some people hate women, and a $3 donation is a lot for a person of colour. A bathwater drank is a herpes earned. Benjamin Bagel Cream. This project itself only effectively failed because of their ineffective boycott. People do not want to be tickled when they kiss you, and that is the slippery slope of racist memes. So I would guess the winner for politics is men are bad does not equal don't control people. Ironic. I would like to give an award out to my personal life for the decade, but we have to explore it first. I really didn't want to make this. I love pirates. Ahoy, matey. But more to the point, there's been a surgence of new style YouTubers. I started this channel doing it hard. It was very risky at the time. I was one of the first people to do controversial style video essays, and it's been increasingly difficult to stand out. The clickbait I made no longer games the algorithm, and that's because I was stuck in a corporate America. I had a briefcase and a suit. It was objectively boring. I would be the guy to hit you with a fork. Don't test me. I was so upset that I broke a DVD in half. I soon realized that critique comes in all flavors, and just because it's bad doesn't mean it's bad. Non-valid criticism is if somebody doesn't remember the person who said it, because most people don't know what a person is, and when you make a positive review, even then you will get people in the comments section calling you a massive. So, when things get bad, remember how they wouldn't be bad without knowing what good was to compare it to. We should forgive Joker. If you don't like this movie, you aren't sexism, but if you feel movies can be bad, you are a part of the toxic brood. These people are verbal terrorists, and this man doesn't deserve to love you. They hate me because I'm telling the truth. The rise of Skywalker fanboys, the sheep. They can't take different opinions, equally beautiful opinions. You have the right to like The Last Jedi, and those twisted shells of men cannot be saved or redeemed in any fashion. Sorry, my dog is in the room. Go away, Frankie. I'm trying to record my Oh, he's a good boy, Frankie. Oh. I didn't want to make this video. The people who have tried previously to make this video have all been irresponsibly vague. It's a subjective fact. Sometimes I look back on my videos and I think, what the hell was I thinking? Thankfully, I'm very much improved and evolved since then. I used to think I was able to be objective when I was young and much more retarded, but now lots of people are saying you can be, and that is racism, because shooting Superman is the same as shooting a man with a bulletproof vest. That's metaphor. But a quick message to the man babies. You think people should adhere to your deluded demands and your proclamations, but saying something is objectively anything is robbing it of its true, actual meaning. Subjectivity wins for the personal decade of achievements. And that brings us to the ending. I know there's lots of confusing right now. What's going on? Why are they doing this? Common questions? Well, I'm sorry to say, but I could care less about your personal lives. If something is actually seriously wrong, like a death of a family member, or something of that nature, then it would be more understandable. But that doesn't change the fact that the true winner of the 2010s was racistness. Bringing people down is the opposite of cool. And for the record, there's a difference between being critical and being attacking. I've always been under the school of thought that those who want to bring about pain in people through hurt simply don't love themselves. The future already happened. The past is yet to come, and that is occurring right now. Adolf Hitler. Opinions are mostly wrong. Some people's opinions matter, assuming those people make money, but that works more as a vertical point than a line or a loop. There's a lot of people out there who just like to cry and whine, but for the most part, it's hard to write things. So when things are written bad, it's okay. It all fits. You know, for everything you guys think creators do wrong, you got wrong. Sorry, it sucks, but that's what good storytelling do. They were so preoccupied with castrated rams or not, they didn't stop to think if they could. Also Hitler. To challenge someone's opinion directly is to be close-minded. Like, I'm bad at debates, sure, but debates are homosexual. And many reviewers use critical analyses in debate as a Trojan horse for cyberbullying. We have to talk about toxic fandoms. Before I go, there's one more thing. Before I go to sleep, I think of cooked carrots. Fuck cooked carrots. Ironic. If you guys like this video, which is a different style of video, it's a more of a commentary style of video, unlike my other video, then please consider starting your own Patreon. Dedicated to the death and resurrection of Tonod Loke, supreme leader and founder of the intellectual gaming community.